Loving Sai Ram, Sister Ramya Gopinath Rao, the Sri Satya Sai Global Council Trinidad and Tobago lovingly welcomes you to the series Awake, Unite and Inspire. We are extremely happy, privileged, and honored to have you as our guest on this evening's program. Sister Ramya, can we begin with how did you first come into contact with our beloved Mother Sai?
Saram, Brother Faiz, I would like to begin by offering my most loving and humble pranams at the lotus feet of my beloved Lord, Bhagavan Sri Satya Sai Baba, who is the inner motivator of all and the indweller who guides our lives. Sairam, Brother Faiz, and thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this very inspiring series. So glad to be with you. And let me start by sharing a little bit of my initial journey to Swami as you requested. So, actually, when I was thinking about it, I think our family's association with Swami begins with my mother and her maternal, uh, my maternal aunt, her cousin, married the nephew of the Rani of Chincholi, who many of us have heard from Satyam Shivam Sundaram. And starting in the late 1950s, my mother, and early 60s, my mother had darshan and sparshan of Swami when he came to visit my aunt's house in Bangalore. She tells me that my first darshan of Swami was when I was 2, when he came to that same house to perform the Upanayanam or thread ceremony of my 2 cousins, her children. So, and just a little bit of other background, just to set the stage. In December of, but we lived in Canada. So when I was very small, so I was 3 years old, we emigrated to Canada, and that's where I grew up. And so after that initial darshan that I had, which I don't remember, I don't remember having any sort of contact with Swami personally until much later. However, we always had a picture of Swami on our family altar. And, so he was familiar only in that way. But I have to say that at that time, I did not feel any particular connection with this picture or with Swami. Now, in December of 1991, my parents had visited India, and Swami called them for an interview. And in that interview, he told them many things about our family. That was, I think, perhaps the first interview that both of them had had together. And, and in that interview, asked my father to come back to India to wind up his surgical practice, come back to India and work in the new super specialty hospital that had just come up. So they came back to Canada and immediately made preparations to do just this. There was no hesitation on their part. And I think, despite me maybe not registering it so much in that at that time, there was a lesson there for me as well. So Swami tells us that, for faith to awaken in our hearts, there have to be 3 things: karmamu, kalamu, and karanamu. So all of your past associations and journey has to create the right set of circumstances. The time, kalamu, has to be right. And finally, there has to be something that sets this whole sort of bonfire of faith ablaze. And in my case, that spark was my very transformative experience in 1995 when I was very fortunate and blessed to be part of the summer course in Indian culture and spirituality that Swami ran every summer for his students in India. And it was very strange the way that it happened because, there was a group of girls who were going from the US to attend this summer course. Now, I was living in Canada at the time, but through a series of, you know, very interesting circumstances, I was fortunate to be included in this group. And I can tell you, how far away I was at that time from from Swami in a sense, because I actually thought about it. I wondered whether I should do this or not. And so somebody much wiser than me, fortunately, told me that, if you are included in this, and at that time, all of the names had to be approved by Swami, then Swami means you to come. And that was the best decision I ever made, because we had 2 weeks of sheer bliss. I mean, we were treated exactly like Swami's students. We heard him speak every day. The theme that year was the Bhagavatam. So he talked every day, and we heard other very learned people also talk to us. We were given interesting tasks, such as pulling up the weeds in the compound around Trai Brindavan. And we were given the opportunity to sing bhajans or lead bhajans in Sai Ramesh Hall. And most of all, he actually interacted with us twice. And in one of those interviews, he gave all of us the opportunity to ask a question. Now, remember I told you that he had asked my parents to come back to India. Well, no sooner had my parents done that than my father began to become ill. And in retrospect, it was very clear that Swami had been very specific for my father's protection and for all of our protection. But at the time, I was extremely worried. And so when Swami gave me a chance to ask him a question, that's all I could think about. Swami, my father is ill, what to do? And Swami said, you come. You come and look after father. So luckily, I had the impulse at the time to say, when, Swami, when shall I come? And he said, come for birthday. And then he turned to everybody else and he said, all of you come for birthday. So this was in May of 1995. And the background here also is that in July of 1995, I was supposed to start a postdoctoral fellowship at the National Institutes of Health in the US. So at that time, I had finished my residency, finished my infectious disease fellowship, and I was very excited to start this fellowship at the NIH. It was quite a prestigious thing coming from Canada, etc. And I thought it was the next step in my career. But here was Swami telling me to come in November and look after my father, which I was glad to do. But he didn't say how long to stay. He didn't say what I should do when I got there. He didn't say anything. He moved on to other topics. And that was all that I was left with. And so I think that, fortunately for me, I think, as I said, this experience just somehow opened the floodgates, and Swami completely captured my heart. So there was no question of saying no, or no question of refusing. And so I came back to Canada and made preparations to move back to India in November. And at that time, many people asked me, okay, are you sure this is what you want to do? Are you sure, you're giving up quite an opportunity here, and so on and so forth. And I somehow, I think it is Swami's grace. When he calls you, he also gives you the strength and the conviction to follow through. And it was purely because of Swami's grace. I think I was very firm about it. And, you know, and then I called my erstwhile boss, the one who was the lab chief of the lab in which I was supposed to work. And I explained the situation to him. I said, Tom, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to come in July. These are the circumstances and I have to go. He was very understanding, and it was a brief conversation, but he completely understood. So I went about my business, but could not help but feel a little regretful that such an opportunity was gone, because many people looked for those things, and it wasn't always easy to come by. But then, you know, 2 weeks later, Tom called me again, and he said, something has been really prompting me to look into this and to inquire further because we've never done anything like this. But I think I have it all figured out now. How would you like to work for us, but stay in India? And so, I was so flabbergasted, and it was something that I'd never thought was even possible. But there he was. This is something that had never been done. His lab or the division had never done something like this. But something prompted him to make those inquiries and make it possible for me to take the position, but stay in India and work there for the NIH lab, and to be able to take care of my father and to kind of continue my career. And so, for me, that was such a profound experience because it taught me, like nothing else could have, that when you put your faith in Swami and you do exactly as he asks, it may not, you may not sort of know where this is going or what it's leading to. It almost feels sometimes like you're jumping off a cliff, but you just do it. And when you do it, he will open all sorts of doors for you and take care of all the other things. So it was such a profound experience. I've never forgotten it, and it's, I think, guided the rest of my journey in many ways. So that's how I came. Sairam.
Sister Ramya, that was so beautiful and inspiring. And what really stood out is your adherence implicitly to follow his request without asking a question. And that is really amazing. Sometimes there's a tendency when the ego gets involved to want to, in order to pursue what the ego wants, we tend to want to make an excuse or create a situation. But here are you in a situation implicitly following Swami's instructions, and then look at the grace that came with the opportunity that was presented to you to work in India and still be able to look after the request that Swami made. Really, really wonderful. So, sister, share with us. I know you've had many, many wonderful experiences with Mother Sai over the years. And sometimes when I ask this particular question to devotees, there's so many, and sometimes it's a little bit challenging to pick, two of the most memorable ones. But share with us two of the most memorable experiences you've had with our Mother Sai.
Yeah, thank you, Brother Faiz. It's a lovely question, and as you say, sometimes it's hard to choose. But I have to say that you know, the two that I wanted to share today have sort of real messages within them. So I thought maybe it will be helpful for others as well. So I think the first one that I would like to share is a very sweet episode, which just kind of makes your heart melt with the love of Mother Sai. So as I said, when I was at the summer course, I was just about I then subsequently began my time at the NIH. I spent 5 years there. During the time that I was at NIH, I got married and had both of my children during that time. Now, when we were expecting our first child, we had read, my husband and I had read so much, we were reading more and more about Swami. We were very fortunate to live very close to Gita Mohan Ram, which I will get back to a little later on. But she has played a huge role in our lives, and somehow Swami has communicated many things to us through her. But she told us so many things about Swami, and there was always the sweetness of how he would interact with people, how he would be part of their lives. And so when we were expecting our first child, we'd heard so many stories and read about how he would name children. And we thought, wow, what an amazing thing that would be. You know how, as a parent, as especially as a first-time parent, you think that it's everything is so new and so beautiful in many ways, and you only sort of want everything good for your child. And so we were thinking, wow, it would be so nice if Swami would name our child. But we thought, okay, there's just no way, because we are, Swami's over there. I mean, there's no way he is even aware of us. I mean, where would we even have that opportunity? So we thought, anyway, that summer, in July, Geeta and her family were making a trip to India. My son was born in August. So in July or June, I think they went, we wrote a letter, my husband and I, and we chose five boys' names and five girls' names. And we wrote a letter to Swami and we said, Swami, we are expecting our first child. We don't know if it's a boy or a girl, but please, bless us, and bless the child. And so we just put these five girls' names, five boys' names, and just folded the letter, put it in an envelope, tucked the flap in. We didn't seal it, and we asked Geeta whether she would take it and offer it to Swami. And she said, yes, I will take it, but sometimes Swami does not like other people giving other people's letters. In fact, he had made a specific comment to her on one of her previous trips when she had taken, letters from center members and so on. So she said, I will try, but I can't promise anything. So we said, yep, understood. As long as, even if he takes the letter, we will consider that the biggest blessing, and we will just choose one of the names from that list. So we sent the letter. She went, and then I was getting closer to the end of my pregnancy. So what she told us later on was, when she went to Prashanti Nilayam, Swami was already out the day that they arrived. He was out for darshan. So they went to their room, just put all their luggage and ran to Sai Kulwant Hall. And Swami, always so thrilled to see them, he called them immediately in for an interview. And so he spent about an hour with them, with the whole family, asking, and, so lovingly. But when they left, Geeta had realized that she had left my letter with her luggage in her room. So she was feeling really bad, because she thought, okay, the Swami called us already. I didn't have a chance to take this, she was feeling bad about it. So anyway, the next day, she remembered to take the letter, but thought, okay, if I get a chance, if he comes near to me as I'm sitting in the line, maybe I can offer it. So she had the letter with her, and lo and behold, Swami called them again into the interview room. And I remember Geeta telling us that she was very surprised, because they already had a long interview the day prior. So Geeta was is saying, I don't know what else there was for him to tell us. And so, but nonetheless, he called them in, and a very short interview. And within a few minutes, he was ushering them out the door again. And again, she forgot to, the impact of Swami's presence, she forgot to uh, offer him the letter. So as she was passing him at the door on the way to go out, he said, didn't your friend give you a letter? And then she realized, and she said, oh, yes, Swami, here it is, here it is. And so he took the letter from her and opened it. We had not sealed it. So the flap, he opened the flap, took out the letter, read it, and then folded it back, put it back in the envelope, and handed it back to Geeta. So this in itself was a little odd, because Swami almost never hands back letters. When he takes it, he takes it. And so this was a little unusual, but they were leaving, so they didn't have any chance to think about it. And as they walked back, she and her mother, she realized that the envelope was sealed. And remember that it had been open when she had offered it to Swami, but now it was sealed. And so she was even more puzzled. And I remember this was the days before the cell phone. So she called us from Prashanti Nilayam, and she said, um, this has happened. I have this letter. Somehow it's all sealed. Do you want me to send it? I will send it by mail. We said, no, 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 please don't trust it to the mail. Just bring it when you come. And so she arrived back, I think, in the second week, the first or second week of August. My son was born on the 20th of August. And so as soon as she came over to our house with the envelope. And when we opened it, Brother Faiz, you would not believe the love of this mother, Sai, that it was the same letter that we had sent, but now there was one girl's name underlined and one boy's name underlined. And within the envelope were two gold pendants. One was a Lakshmi, a coin with a Lakshmi on it, and the other was an Om, a figure of an Om with a little hook for a chain. And the envelope was full of vibhuti. It was not in packets, it was just loose vibhuti, it was full of vibhuti. And so we were so, so stunned and overcome. I mean, there were a lot of tears, because this was, really a mother responding to the yearning of another mother, and even now I think about it and it still brings tears to my eyes. But this is our Swami. He basically, distance is not an issue for him, and he hears everything that we say within our hearts. He is omnipresent. His love is everywhere, and that was such a powerful lesson for us. And so 2 weeks later, my son was born, so it was clear that his name was Aniruddha, and the Om pendant was for him. But we had no idea what the Lakshmi pendant was for. But then 18 months later, my daughter was born. Her name is Samyukta, which is the other name that Swami had underlined, and it was clear that the Lakshmi pendant was for her. So that was one, most precious, memorable experience of mine. And would you like me to go on and share the other one? Yeah. So I think the other one that sort of taught me a lot is the following. And so when again, I was when I got married, had my children, I was at the NIH. When I was at the NIH, when I came from Canada to the US, I was on a J1 visa, which is an exchange visitor visa. And so, I had, in order to keep my immigration status, I had to sort of keep working at the NIH. Now, we had also started, as I say, understanding more, reading more, listening to more talks, reading Swami's literature. So it became very clear to us that Swami was very particular about the role of a mother in the child's life. And she was, we came across so many instances where he says that nothing can replace the love and care that a mother provides to her own child, especially within the first 5 years of life. That is when the child requires the nurturing, and really the love and the sort of care that the mother and the parents bring is what sort of makes a difference to the child, for their entire life. And I was reading places where he said that that is the most important job for a woman. And so I sort of started really thinking hard about it. Like I said, my approach to Swami has been just to follow what he says and follow it implicitly, because it has always been the right way to go for us. And so I started to think, okay, well, if that is the case, then, should I be quitting work at some point to be with my children? And again, when I finished my time at NIH, Samyukta, our daughter, was just about 6 months old. So that was the earliest that I could actually stay home. But then at that time, I really began to think, okay, I need to do this because this is what Swami says. He doesn't say, I've never come across anywhere where he says, well, it's different if you're a doctor, it's different if you're a teacher, it's different if you are a computer person. You know, as far as I could tell, it was all across the board. It applied to everybody. And so I really made the decision to stay home. I say in one word that I made the decision, but I can tell you that it was extremely difficult because up till then I had been very focused on my career, as many of us are. And, you know, there were certain steps that one would have to take in one's career. I also was, you know, got quite a lot of interesting comments from the other people around me when I said that I was going to stay home because things like, oh, you can't really be that serious about your career if you're gonna take time off, or oh, I guess your husband must be making you stay home, you know, because of your culture. I mean, literally things like this were some of the remarks that I got, and so but I felt that okay, this was what we had to do, and my husband was very much on board with it also. And so, despite all of the negative sort of input that I got from my professional colleagues and so on and so forth, I made that decision. And the reason that I bring this up, Brother Faiz, is just to emphasize that difficult as it was, when I made that decision to stay home with my children, just took that one step, Swami responded again 100-fold. And, you know, just to cut a very long story short, to get to the important point, when my daughter was about 3 years old, there was suddenly an opportunity to work as an infectious disease physician that literally landed in my lap. I don't want to, you know, go into all the details, but it was a lot of those Sai incidences that we know about. And so the opportunity just landed in my lap, and it seemed like it was tailor made. But both my husband and I were we talked about it and we said, okay, maybe this is the way Swami works, but you know, Samyukta is still 3 years old. You know, we were gonna stay home. I was gonna stay home until she entered kindergarten. How are we gonna do this? So we were thinking, and you won't believe, this is yet another example of Swami's omnipresence. That this was around November timeframe, and Gita, again, who figures largely in many of our stories here, she was in Prashanti Nilayam for Swami's birthday that year. And he came to her one day in the line and he said, tell your sister to come. So she was so puzzled by this whole thing. First of all, you know, she was used to the sister part because Swami, you know, for soon after we got married, started referring to me as Gita's sister. So he would ask about me as her sister. He would, tell her to tell me things and things like this. And so she knew who her sister was, but she didn't know why Swami was asking us to come because she was in India. This had all happened in the US. And of course, again, no cell phone. So we had not been in touch. And so she called us again, made a trunk call from Prashanti Nilayam and said, Swami is asking you to come. What is going on? So we told her very briefly that this opportunity had come up, but we were in a dilemma. We didn't know, we were trying to really follow what Swami would want us to do. So she said, no, he told you to come physically. So come. And so my husband said, well, why don't you go at Christmas time? Because I have a week off. Go without the children because you'll never be able to sit in the front row if you take the children. Just go by yourself and let's see what Swami has in mind. So I did and went straight to Prashanti Nilayam, and Swami came right to me in the line, and I knelt up and offered him a letter, and I said, Swami, shall I work? And he said, yes. And Santosham, and he blessed the letter and materialized Vibhuti for me in the line. And he said, work. And then, as if to kind of underscore that, he came again the next day and did exactly the same thing. And again, blessed me completely to go to work. And so I think that, the lesson, the reason that I wanted to share this is because, we may think that we are making all of these sacrifices, or we may think that we have a certain idea in our head about what we want to do with our lives. And that suddenly now we have to change everything because we are mothers, or we have other responsibilities. And what Swami taught me so clearly is that if you do what I ask you to do, and you are following the message to the best of your understanding, the best of your ability, and of course, with the understanding that you are fortunate enough to do that, because to do that, it requires not only that you have the economic circumstances to allow you to stay home, but that you have the support at home. So you have a supportive spouse, you have some other supportive network that will allow you to do those things. That is all completely understood, because Swami is also very practical. But assuming that all of those are the case, then if you follow what he asks you to do, he will always, always, utilize whatever talent you think you have in some way. He will put it to work in a way that he thinks is best for you, not the way that you necessarily think you want to do. And so I think it was yet another uh, sort of demonstration of his omnipresence, of his love. Imagine calling me all the way just to bless me and make it so clear. He did all this for me, and I was, still so grateful. And but it taught me so much that slowly he teaches you to not worry so much about what the world is saying. Focus on Swami, and he will guide you all throughout. Sairam.
Sister Ramya, that was so touching and inspiring. And, you know, what shines through both of your experiences is this love and compassion of Mother Sai. And I can well imagine that, as you shared, thousands of people would have been in Prashanti Nilayam at the time you were there. And yet Swami came to you. So it was like you and God alone for that few moments in time where his full attention, energy, and love was just being poured out to you. And I can imagine how you would have felt, so special that Swami actually singled you out, came to you, blessed you, not on one occasion, but on two occasions. And I'm sure that continues to resonate in your heart. So, very, very beautiful.
Yeah, no, just to add, Brother Faiz, I mean, I think definitely it was such a precious experience, but I think it is the same, I know you have come across, I have certainly come across all the countless ways in which Swami shows his presence to everybody. It'll be in a way that is specific to them, that is sort of most touching for them. But, these are just his the ways that he shows us, all of us have these experiences, that he's there and he's listening, and he's there always to help us, to support us, encourage us to follow the path that he has laid out for our own spiritual growth and good.
And I think, Sister Ramya, what really stands out in your experiences there is your implicit faith to follow his teachings, to follow his directive implicitly without question. And it reminds me of a verse in the Bible: seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and then everything else will be added on to you. So here are you, as you said, Swami won over your heart, and you wanted more than anything else to do what my Lord wants me to do. At the sacrifice of even advancing your career, more important than that was to follow implicitly his guidance. And then in doing that, look at what he's now added on to you. So that is so beautiful and inspiring. And it leads me to another question that, especially women, Baba has spoken so much about women's role in the society, that on the laps of women lie the future of our nation. That if you want to judge the progress of a nation, look at its mothers, look at this woman.
Mhm.
Are they humble? Are they self sacrificing? Do they lead moral and virtuous lives? And if the answer is yes, Swami says you can be guaranteed that that will be a good nation. But also, when you observe the role of women, the multifaceted roles that are performed, as a wife, as a mother, as a daughter-in-law, as a sister, as a sister-in-law. But even from a family perspective, having to take the leading role where the character development of your children is concerned. Swami has also said that women have more devotion than men. They lead men on the virtuous paths when they go astray. So, women are the custodians of Sanatan Dharma, of righteousness. So, my question to you is that against that background, how have you been able to take Swami's teachings and practice it as a woman in many different roles, and also as a working mother and as a professional? How have you been able to balance family with work and spirituality?
Thank you for the question, Brother Faiz. It's a multifaceted question, and it's certainly something that I think many of us, especially as women, we really grapple with it. And I can tell you that for me, having grown up in the West, I can tell you that my sort of understanding of this has literally gone 180 degrees, because I think that when we grow up, especially in the West, we're always kind of I think we're not only taught perhaps through the educational system, but also I think the environment around us is very focused on what you can achieve outside. So what work you do, what position you have, what promotion you get, what impact you have on the outside world is always sort of judged as something that is desirable. And I think what I've learned over several years now is that in Swami's world, it's almost exactly the opposite. He is not so much looking at what you will achieve externally as he is looking at what your journey is internally. And I think that for women specifically, here in the West, there's always this idea that, oh, as a woman, I'm just as good as a man and I can do anything that a man does. And all that is true, but I always say that that is actually shortchanging women. I think women can do much more than men can do. And I think that it just is it's a very important change in perspective, because it's not so much that Swami really wants us as women to make a big impact outside until and unless we have actually made an impact within. I mean, I think it's very common experience for all of us that the woman is really the center of the house. I mean, it just is. I mean, all of us have grown up with that. I think it's probably the vast majority of people have that experience, and so I think that, um, I've realized over time that what Swami tells us is actually, he really means it. He means that we as women are the foundation of society. And the reason that we are the foundation of society is that we bring up the building bricks of that society, which are the individuals. And so it is only when we ourselves go through that sadhana, we ourselves make the inquiry to ask ourselves who we really are and what our true purpose in life is, that we can then, sort of turn that learning into care and love for the family. And I think that what Swami has taught me is that comes first and foremost. It doesn't matter what your qualifications are particularly. I think that is what I have understood in my own life, that it doesn't really matter what um, what you are doing externally, once you have a child, it is about sacrifice, and it is about, fostering that child, and it is about encouraging the latent human values to blossom within that child, because the mother, by and large, is the first teacher. And certainly, these days, fathers are also very much involved with the upbringing of children, or should be, because there's much to learn. But Swami clearly says that for the first 5 years, the mother's care and fostering and teaching, just by what she imparts, the songs that she sings, the things that she exposes the child to, the way she sort of interacts with the child, is something that the child learns from and becomes secure as a person. And then all of the other things are attached to that. And it's only when that sense of self is very strong and secure that we can then grow up to be strong and secure human beings who are aware of the qualities within us. And so I think that, the way that I have balanced it is with a lot of cooperation from my husband. He actually has helped a lot over the years, because, certainly I was. Have been a busy infectious disease physician, and there would be many times when I would be on call on the weekends, and very, there for literally 2 solid days. And my husband would literally, would take care of the children, would sort of really, even help with the cooking, so many things. And it's only when we can sort of work in partnership like that, that together, it's a feeling that together we are able to follow what Swami wants us to do. Because although he expects a lot of women and a lot from mothers, he also expects that fathers fulfill their responsibilities to their children, to the family, and help to create that loving and God-centered atmosphere within the family. It takes both. I hope that answers.
Yes, Sister Rami, that was very, very beautifully and factually stated. And in your case, you are so blessed to have a spouse that is supportive. And
Hmm.
then you mentioned that on one of your trips to India, he basically told you, well, you go, I will look after the children.
Yes,
And I
that
think
was
that
the
is,
yeah.
yes, please go ahead.
No, no, no. I was going to say yes. That was the time when Swami, told Geeta to tell your sister to come. So he was, gracious enough to say, "Go by yourself, because it'll be much easier. You won't have to manage the kids there." So that was a wonderful blessing.
Yeah. And I think I just want to pull out what you've said and reiterate it, that it is so important to recognize that in the family, the woman is not the one totally responsible for the household and taking care of the children. It is a partnership that you've said where responsibilities should be shared so that there's a loving, supportive environment for children to grow up. And also, when the child growing up in this environment sees also that partnership, that harmony, that unity, it impacts the child as well. You see, in growing
Yes.
up. And these the parents provide good role models now for the children as they grow up. So we need to constantly emphasize that it's really a partnership and it's not a one-sided affair. But when the father and the mother have the responsibilities and they fulfill them, dutifully and lovingly, there's no greater heaven than a family like that. So thank you so much for sharing, and you are so fortunate to have a spouse who provides that kind of support. And I know, as you've stated, you've shared, he's also a doctor, so he's also extremely busy with his work and his profession.
Yeah, he's a chemical engineer, a PhD. So that sort of a engineer doctor, if you will. Yeah.
So thank you very much, sister, for sharing. I think this is a very pertinent aspect of our development in the home. And as Swami said, he's also said that if in the family there's unity and there's love, you're going to have a good nation. So it really starts in the home with the
Yeah.
parents, but especially the mother. So as we move on, um, over the years, you would have built your own unique relationship with Swami. As each one of us, we are works in progress in terms of our contact, our relationship with that divinity. What does Sai Baba mean to you today?
That's such an all-encompassing question, Brother Faiz. I think he is the absolute center of my life, and he is the most loving mother, as the incidents that I've shared demonstrate. He can be a disciplinarian father as well. But over time, I think I have realized why Swami says, when I take care or I give you the things that you want, so that at some point you will want the things that I have come to give. And I think that over time, I sort of, somehow with all the love and all the sort of the teaching, I think I have come to see him as the most divine of gurus and the indweller within all. And I think he teaches us that we must look for him within, and I think that has been what I think all of us at this point are really striving to do, is to look for him. And he tells us that the place to look is not anywhere outside but within. So he is the absolute center of my life. And I think, the center of everything that we do as a family is Swami.
Thank you very much, sister, for sharing that. So, how has practicing the teachings of Sri Satya Sai Baba continued to impact and to transform your life?
So, when I sort of reflected on this question, I realized that really Swami has done nothing less than reveal the purpose and the goal of our lives. I mean, that is how profound his teachings are, because when we grow up without this perspective, or this very incredible perspective, we may think that the goal of life is to do well in our careers, to have a comfortable life, to be able to go on nice vacations, and to sort of enjoy the good things of life. And I think that what Swami's core message is that the goal of human life is nothing short of understanding and recognizing our own innate divinity. And I think that for what that one thing alone, aside from everything else that he has meant to me over the course of these last several decades, I think I am so grateful to him, because I think he really teaches us that it is not really what you do, but who you are. And by laying the emphasis on the who you are part over and over again, he really forces us to recognize our own humanness, our own humanity, the values that are inborn within us. And he slowly turns our vision from looking all around and getting distracted. He slowly turns it inward. And I think that has been sort of the biggest transformation. I think that, just the recognition, I would not say that I'm anywhere transformed, but just the recognition that, that vision has been turned. And I think I go back to this thing about when we are on this spiritual path, we must recognize that he is the most divine of gurus, and he is our own. Each of us has him as our individual guru, and he will give us very specific instructions, and it's in his writings, it's in his discourses, it's in the guidance that he has given other people, it's in the guidance that he gives each of us. He gives us the blueprint for how to live our lives and how to travel closer to realizing that innate divinity. And I think that once we sort of adjust our focus to that, then everything else that we seek in the world will be added to us. But and things like things like whatever we must do in the world, qualities like when we have that implicit faith, then along with that comes acceptance, and along with that comes the ability to say, Swami, I will accept what you give me, whatever it is. It's good, it's bad, it's these are judgments I make. I will try to accept everything that you give me. And I just wanted to when soon after we were married, he gave us a passage that he had written on his letterhead. And if you permit, I'd like to just read that. It's very small, but it sort of encapsulates the journey. It says, and I quote, "Great souls never lose their balance. By preserving our calm, we can always turn the stumbling blocks into stepping stones. Never, never let the feeling of helplessness cross your mind. When one realizes his own self to be the all, he cannot desire, but simply enjoys everything as his." And he gave this to us, like I said, I think a year or two after we were married. And I remember looking at it and reading it. And obviously, the first part was fairly easy to understand because all of us have difficulties, and certainly we had our share of difficulties. In those few years where there were a lot of difficult challenges. So it was clear to, at least what I thought is, it was clear to understand what the stumbling blocks are and how we overcome them. That was clear. But I had no idea what he meant by the second sentence, when one realizes his own self to be the all. I had no idea what that meant. And, so we framed it. He gave it to us. So we framed it, and it's on the wall of our puja room. And every few months, I would go back to that and I would read it again, and I would puzzle over it again, and still not make any headway in terms of what the second part meant. But and this is the journey that he leads us on, because over time, it's kind of like, here is this light and you are moving like this. So you get a different viewpoint as you go on in life, and as with the experiences, with what you learn, with what you imbibe, what you when you bring Swami into your mind and your heart and reflect and think of him all the time without you even knowing it, there is this journey that happens within. And so I realized over the last few years that, oh, now I'm starting to get a glimmer of understanding of what he means by that second sentence. And really, what he means is, I think that this is the purpose of all of our journeys. He means stepping stones that we need to overcome are not only the difficulties we might encounter in life, but they are our inner enemies, the things that we are negative qualities that we must overcome to journey further. And I think the core of his message, what I have come to understand, is that not only are we all divine, but we are all one. And he wants us over and over again. Once I started thinking about it, you realize that in every single discourse, every Vahini, every chapter in Satya Sai Speaks, every discourse that he gives, or he's always talking about the Atma. He's always talking, he's addressing us as embodiments of divine Atma. And so I have come to kind of think that really that's what he's trying to get us to. He has poured all his love and his care and his concern on us collectively, because he wants us to move to this realization. And he's explained everything. He's explained how we are made up as human beings. We are, the body, we are the senses, we are the mind, we are the intellect, we are the atma. And he has explained how, each of these different parts um, can actually obscure our view, or our view of our own inner light. And everything that we do, all the sadhanas, the meditation, the namasmarana, the seva, all of them are exercises to clean this mind and clean the antakarana, really, so that we can, understand and get closer to who we really are. So this is the priceless, priceless treasure that he is trying to teach us. And I also, I think, find that it's extremely practical. And I feel that we, if the more that we explore the practicality of this idea, it will just help us live a more balanced life with more equanimity, not buffeted by ups and downs so much. So I'll stop there. As you can see, it's a subject dear to my heart, but I'll stop there.
Sister Ramya, that was so beautifully explained, so simply put. And you really covered the essence of why this avatar has come. And while you were speaking, it reminded me of a very humorous saying that somebody shared with me, that in the beginning, Swami hooks you, and then he cooks you, and then he barbecues you.
No, that is very true, very true. Certainly have experienced that. Yes, but
Yes,
it's
and it
all out of love, just like a mother. You can't, it's love and discipline, love and yeah.
wonderful. And it ties in nicely with what you've said, that he gives us what we want so that we can want what he has really come to give, which is liberation, which is realization that I am God, I am not different from God, that we are divine. And that is really the journey. And as you so rightly said, it's a journey from eye to eye, but it has to happen from within. The journey
Mhm.
is always within. And as you also highlighted, when you begin to understand and practice to that state where you can function from that atmic level, you begin to see the whole of life totally different.
Yeah,
Priorities. different. You want to expand a little bit on that?
I think it's just I think I mean, and please, I do not absolutely want to give any sort of impression that I'm anywhere close. I think it's just kind of the recognition of the beauty of what Swami says, because if you can see that and again, this is a I, keep trying to practice and I fail and I try again and I fail. But I think to maybe just keep going. And for example, he gives a very beautiful analogy when he says that consider that your thoughts or your grief or your fear or negative thoughts are like um, the trail or like a plane or a bird that passes through the sky. So it passes through the sky, but it leaves no trace beyond as it even when you see a jet in the sky and there's those contrails, after a while everything disappears. And he says specifically, let your thoughts be like let your mental firmament be that, so that the thoughts just pass through, but they leave you unaffected. And then when you think about, okay, well, how is that possible? Then you start kind of getting a glimpse that maybe we are different from our thoughts. They're not us. We are different from our senses. They're not us. We are different from our body. They're not us. So then it kind of makes you start questioning yourself, okay, who am I really? And so, one of the most profound teachings that Swami conveys or tries to convey over and over again. You know, he tells us your mind is a mad monkey. It's a, you know, and don't identify with it. Don't follow it. And the reason he tells that is us that because it's a very practical thing for living a balanced life. I have to say
Yes.
one other, I'm sorry, Brother Faiz, one more thing that I just
Yes,
wanted to
please.
mention is that I think that, you know, I think when if you you know, as I have cultivated you know, sort of a more focus on this, I find that, you know, your sort of focus on other things naturally falls away. So if you fill your heart, and this is what Swami says all the time, you fill your heart with Swami, with any deity or any light that appeals to you or that speaks to you, then some of the other things fall away. So it ultimately at our stage, in at least speaking for myself, at my stage, I think the biggest thing is just faith and namasmarana all the time, and you know, focusing really on what Swami says over and over again. Let's take that part seriously too. And when we do, we have to also be prepared for the fact that that being on the spiritual path is not all light and love and laughter. There's that, but it also takes courage to be different from those people around you. It takes a certain grit to be able to stick to the path. It takes a certain you know, you know, it ultimately comes down to faith. So am I going to have faith in this beautiful avatar, this God of mine, um, even if it takes me away from what, you know, the common sort of course of life is. Sairam.
Very, very beautiful sharing, Sister Ramya. And as you were talking about the plane and the bird and not leaving any trace, it brought back to memory a very beautiful saying of Swami where he says, let the wave of memory,
Mm.
the storm of desire, and the fire of emotion pass through the system without affecting your equanimity. So
Yes,
we,
that's one of my favorites. Thank you, Brother Faiz, for bringing
yeah,
that up. Yes.
yeah, being that eternal witness, but not getting involved, living in the world, but not letting the world live in you to the point where you become attached or infected. Very, very beautiful sharing.
Yeah, it's very difficult. I mean, it's a challenge, I think, and you know, I think that is the beauty of the journey. You kind of try your best, you fall, you try your best, you fall, and I think it takes, I think it takes lifetimes, but it's just a wonderful um, it's wonderful to I you know, the gift of knowing what the goal of life is so profound, and that is all, that is what Swami has taught us. You know, I think he has given us this pearl, this, you know, this jewel that we really need to focus on.
Mhm. And you made such a significant point because, on the spiritual part, as we begin to practice, we will fall many times, we will make
Mm.
mistakes, and that is all good because even in the falling and in the mistakes, there is also learning and growth taking place. So it's important not how much times we fall, but how much times we're able to pick up ourselves and continue the journey and persevere as he himself and reach to the point where stop not until the goal is reached. So no matter how much times you fall, you get back up with that increased fervor and vigor, and you persevere, you practice, you detach. His grace is there, and you arrive at the goal. So even in the falling, there are lessons to be learned along the path.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I think sometimes the falling is as important as anything else, because it's only those things that make you really introspect. Okay, what did I do wrong? You know, how did this happen? What should I have done differently? I mean, I think you know, there's been so much introspection because you know, one is constantly failing, right? So you know, you can just you just have to keep trying, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sister, for sharing that. So, Sister Ramya, you are an infectious disease physician, medical officer. You've been very much involved in your practice. You've been serving Swami through this particular means. You've attended and volunteered in many medical camps in Puttaparthi, the Philippines, Kazakhstan, and the US. Share a little bit about that experience going into, let's say, a country like Kazakhstan, which is predominantly Muslim. What is a Sai doctor? What is that experience like going into a country like this to do a medical camp as a saver?
Yes, thank you for the question. Yeah, that was one of the most beautiful experiences of our lives. I was fortunate to share it with my children and my husband. All four of us went to this camp, and I think being in a Muslim country was interesting. That was the first time that I had ever had that experience of actually being part of a Sai mission in predominantly Muslim country. And so we basically did not, there were no pictures of Swami. There were no, none of the usual things that we're used to, like Aarti or anything like that. Anything that would sort of make it of a more you know, give it a sort of a more religious or any sort of flavor, spiritual flavor. We didn't have that, but I tell you, we learned so much from the other devotees who actually set up the camp. So this was in Kazakhstan. Interestingly, it occurred in a place called Sayram. It's spelled Sayram, and it is one of the oldest communities in that part of Asia, and it's been around for a couple of thousand years actually. And so, as it is, the name was a real draw. But honestly, the devotees who actually set up the camp and acted as our translators and all of those multiple tasks that needed to be done. These were people who came from Russia, they came from Kazakhstan, they came from Azerbaijan, they came from different places. And all of them had one thing in common, which was their devotion to Swami. And I tell you, Brother Faiz, it was one of the most moving experiences for all of us to see Swami's glory reflected in the love of these people. I mean, many of them had never been to Prashanti Nilayam. They had never seen Swami physically. They basically, all of them, for example, we met a young man of 23 years old who said that, he since he knew of Swami, he's basically completely become vegetarian. He's given up all other habits. And he said how, that means that, people around him say, you're not a real Kazakh because you don't eat meat. And, they've really embraced the sort of guidelines and instructions that Swami gives to such an extent, and all they want to do is help in some way in the name of Swami. It was the most moving thing. And then the other part is that, like Swami says, the language of the heart is universal. So we, even though we did not speak a word of Russian, we did not speak a word of Kazakh, we did not speak a word of any other local language, and many of them did not speak English, we shared our love of Swami. And as Swami always does, he's the one who is the glue that brings all of us together, that keeps us together. There was such a sense of shared purpose and shared, wanting to sort of participate in this seva, all in Swami's name, with not a picture of Swami in sight. It was an amazing experience, and that's even without getting to the patients themselves, but the just the our fellow devotees. We learned so much from them.
Oh, thank you very much for sharing that. That was so touching and inspiring, Sister Ramya. So, being an infectious disease physician, I want to pose a question now on the current situation with the pandemic as it
Mm,
continues to affect the world in so many myriads of ways. I'm going to just put two or three questions in one so that you could probably answer, I hope, to the best of your ability. So, this pandemic has taken the world by storm. It has
mm,
affected every aspect of our lives in so many different ways. There have been so many deaths, so many a loss of job, economic depression. There have been so many things that have happened on an individual level, a family level, and as a national level. What is your professional opinion in terms of one, what really is this virus all about? Maybe we can chat a little bit about how does one become infected, how we can, what are some of the preventative measures we can practice? What is your take on the vaccine as opposed to taking it and not taking it? And finally, what are some of the spiritual lessons from your perspective that we are learning or can be learned from this global pandemic that is affecting us? I hope I'm not putting too much into one
I was
question.
gonna say it's the whole 2 years all in one question, Brother Faiz. No, yeah, you're right. I mean, it's. I think it has been such an experience for all of us, a completely globally shared experience. But let me see if I can just go back and take them one by one. So, in terms of the virus, I think as probably all of us know by now, it is a coronavirus, which is the type of virus that causes the common cold. But this one is a little bit different. It's related to a couple of other viruses that have caused pandemics or epidemics in the past, and I think as everyone probably knows, there's a big debate about how it originated. But there's no doubt that viruses, by their very nature, the genetic material constantly combines and recombines. And so when it recombines in a way that, and certainly there's some sharing of these viruses between humans and other species, whether it be birds or animals or reptiles, etc. So of course there's the theory that potentially the origin of the SARS-CoV-2 was in a bat, or there've been various theories, but in any case, I think the important thing is that this is a virus that is sufficiently different from what our immune systems have been used to, that it basically caught everybody off guard. And when I say everybody, I mean everybody's immune system off guard. Our immune systems had never seen this particular virus, and so and it's a respiratory virus, which means that the way that it's transmitted is through talking, through laughing, through aerosols, basically, and droplets. And so that is, the reason why it's so highly transmissible, because whenever we're talking or laughing or sneezing or coughing or anything, we generate so many particles, these microscopic particles into the air, and those particles contain live virus. So when somebody else inhales this aerosol, which we all do. I mean, we're in the normal course of events. We're usually so close to each other when we talk to each other, or when we're having dinner together, or we're at a meeting or something like that. There's a lot of transmission of these viral particles, and so when another person inhales them, they infect the cells of the passageways and into and the lungs. And so they hook onto these cells through the receptor that we've heard a lot about. And so the and so that's the way that the virus enters the cell. And then once it's there, it replicates. It literally takes over the machinery of the cell, replicates. then releases more and more virions into the circulation, which then go and infect other cells through the ACE2 receptor, etc. So I think we're all pretty familiar with the sort of basics of how that happens. And I think what we are seeing, we truly are living through, we haven't seen a pandemic like this since the 1918 influenza pandemic that swept the world. And at that time, there was nothing to combat it because even the principles of transmission were not well known, and neither were there any vaccines or anything else to combat it. So as you say, it has devastated, countries, regions, people's lives, everything. There's so much devastation that this virus has brought, not only physically through all the so many deaths and really um, even for people who've recovered, the ongoing physical symptoms that they have that we now call long COVID, but also, of course, because of there's been so much economic devastation, social devastation, isolation, etc. And unfortunately, much as medical science has evolved, we still, in this pandemic, we're going back to real basics such as staying apart from each other, keeping our aerosols and droplets contained through the use of masks. And really, as you remember, at the beginning of the pandemic, that's really all we had. We literally had to keep physically distant, stay away from each other, wash our hands, wear masks all the time, and so on. The difference now, of course, is that we've been lucky enough that we now, science has responded incredibly quickly. There are now multiple vaccines that are active against the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And now the even more exciting thing is not only are there infusion therapies that are available, like where if somebody is at high risk for developing severe disease, they can actually receive an infusion of antibodies that work against the virus. And most exciting now is that very recently, two oral antiviral drugs have been approved under emergency use authorization by the FDA just in the last week of December, actually. And so these are now being made available across the country. And one of them particularly is highly active against SARS-CoV-2 and goes a long way to preventing hospitalization and death. And so I think, one of your other questions was how best can we combat it? I think it always begins with just taking care of your health. Like we know very clearly that people who are diabetic, they're hypertensive, they are significantly overweight, they have other causes of immunosuppression, they have other intercurrent illnesses. All of these things, the older people, all of these things make somebody more vulnerable to severe disease or even death with this particular virus. So I think the first thing is to take care of yourself as best as one can, make sure that any condition that you have is under control, and eat well, rest well, keep a healthy emotional and mental attitude, because that gives a lot of strength also. But in addition to that, I think there's no doubt that things like masking are essential to preventing the transmission of aerosols. Things like vaccination is really key, because the science is indisputable that not only are they well tolerated, but they actually reduce the likelihood of severe illness leading to hospitalization or having to get on a ventilator or even dying by a very significant amount. And what we've also now learned is that initially many of us have received the first 2 doses in the series, but we've also learned that over time, usually 5-6 months, the level of antibodies and immunity to this virus wanes. And so that has resulted in the recommendation to take booster vaccines now, after 5 months, certainly after 6 months. And, in this country and others like us, we're very fortunate that we have a lot that is available. And I would really urge people, if they haven't already, to be vaccinated. These mRNA vaccines are very, very highly effective. And get boosted. Do what you can to protect yourself. I think it's not only important for ourselves, our loved ones, but it's also a seva that we can do for society at large, because we may not be able to help in many specific ways, but we can help by keeping other people safe, by enhancing our own immunity, getting vaccinated, staying masked. All of these things are really important.
So, Sister Rami, in addition to what you said, and thank you so much for that sharing for us to obtain a better understanding of the virus and how it works and the effect of the vaccine. But from your perspective as a medical professional, as well as an aspirant on the spiritual path, what are some of the spiritual lessons we can learn from this global pandemic?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that has been a question that we've all asked ourselves, right, over the past 2 years. Um, so I look at it a couple of different ways. Number one, I think to myself that I don't know how much you have read about the beginning of Swami's medical mission. So back in 1956, when he began his first hospital, there was nothing in Puttaparthi. They had maybe paracetamol, they had some vitamins, they had some antacids, and that was it. And so in the hospital, Swami would be there a lot to see patients, and he would have some of the other people make these little balls that were made out of dried herbs and just other things that they would put together and dry it in the sun and then put it together and make them into these little balls that look like pills. And they would give this to people and make different tonics that I don't know what they were made of. But basically, with these very few medicines, Swami would cure so many conditions and so many people. So I always think of that. I've been thinking about that a lot, because I think to myself, you know, Swami is capable of doing anything. Obviously, those little dried herbs probably had no actual medicinal value potentially, but it was Swami's grace and his healing power that was able to heal so many conditions back in those days. He was constantly there and constantly taking care of people. So as far as the pandemic goes, I've often reflected on the fact that Swami has the ability to cure this. He has the ability to stop it like that. But then, he the pandemic is obviously still with us and it hasn't gone anywhere. And so I think that for me, a lot of it comes down to faith. And we just, one of the things that we sort of have to hang on to is the fact that he is very much here. He is very much here. And everything that is happening is part of his plan and part of his will. And I think part of what I have learned is that even when there are circumstances which make no sense, circumstances which you wish were different, circumstances which make so many people in difficulty or sad, the only thing that we can do is hold on to Swami, pray to him, pray, 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 because prayer is very powerful. And do the best that we can to help each other. But I think some of the lessons really have been not only the faith, to cultivate faith and hold on to it more strongly than ever, but also the value of introspection. I mean, I think Swami has really, in some ways, wanted us to just stop doing things and just be quiet a little bit, be still a little bit, introspect much more, try to focus on Him more than the outside world. And again, do what we can in all of our different ways, whether it's through your profession, whether it's through community services, whether it's through providing food, helping a neighbor do something, whatever it is, we help each other as much as we can and realize that all of us, at the end of the day, all of us are together in this. All of us are affected. All of us are equally vulnerable. And the only way that we can all survive is really to look after each other, send love to each other, even when we can't be together in person. These qualities are extremely essential. And I think, we have to focus on it more and more. We may not be able to physically go and help other people, as much as we would like, but we can do so much in the thoughts that we produce, in the prayers that we send for people. They are very powerful. And, maybe he wants us to focus on those things, focus on him, focus on prayer, focus on, you know, improving ourselves.
Thank you very much, Sister Ramya, for your very valued perspective. And finally, and this is the $1 trillion question that I keep getting when I ask this question, from your personal experience, as a medical profession, as a devotee on the spiritual path, and what you have practiced, from that basis, what can you share to others who intention is to create a better society, a better world, a more value-based society? What can each one of us do to make this happen?
Yes, as you said, it's a $1 trillion question, and I think one that we all strive for. But I think maybe the I guess the place to begin is always with ourselves. I mean, there's just nowhere else to begin. What are we going to do outside until we sort of look within ourselves and try to, try to change ourselves, try to overcome so many of the negative qualities that we have, try to really be more loving, more compassionate, more patient, more, willing to give of yourself and give up things. I think we must start with that. The other part of it is that, as a society, I think, we spend a lot of time thinking about how to train the head. So how do I get smarter? How do I acquire this skill? How do I, become this? How do I do this kind of work? How do I enter this profession? What can I achieve in the world? And what I've learned from Swami, which I think would help a lot everywhere, is that to focus on the heart. Like, what are we doing to train the heart? The heart is the seat of the conscience. It's the seat of, all of the human values and all of the qualities that come out of that. And so I think that, sometimes the model that EHV uses, education and human values, where that Swami has also talked about or taught and developed, is basically the concept of 3HV. So your head, your heart, and your hands. And I think that society, I think we all, let me not say society, I would say myself and anybody that's kind of looking to improve ourselves and, serve society just by being better examples, better neighbors, better parents, better siblings, whatever it is. I think if we remember that the thought that arises in your head must be run through your heart, because your heart is where you are able to discriminate. Is this between what's permanent, what's transient? Is this good? Is this bad? Will this hurt somebody? Will this help somebody? And so it's only when that thought is run through the heart and it's approved by the heart and your conscience that you should, carry it out. And so that is something that we are also engaged in. I think society at large certainly, but actually in my profession, the medical profession, I think it applies a lot. So EHV applied to medicine because sometimes in medicine we're very focused on, figuring out what the problem is and treating it and so on. And the tendency there is to forget that this condition or this this event, medical event, whatever it is, has happened to a person, and that person has a heart and has a brain and has a conscience. So I think the concept that we are all, not only connected, we are all, made of the same light and the same divinity. And if we can kind of express and practice what comes from the heart more than what always comes from the head, I think maybe that will help.
Sister Ramya Gopinath Rao, the Sri Satya Sai Global Council, Trinidad and Tobago, expresses gratitude and appreciation to you for taking the time to share your personal journey and transformation at the Divine Lotus feet. May Bhagwan Sri Satya Sai Baba continue to bless and guide you. May you continue to be a loving instrument in His divine mission. Jai Sai Ram.
Thank you so much, Brother Faiz, for not only this opportunity, but just this wonderful satsang to talk about our beloved Lord. And may he be the guide that we follow, all of us, through our lives. May he continue to light it and bless us, so that we may get closer and closer to him. Jai Sai Ram, and thank you again.